Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're on to our last panel discussion, and it is a fascinating panel discussion. We've kept a tremendous panel to right for the end. Impact of artificial intelligence on insurance. I think this will be very insightful. Venak, bring your panel up and let's get going. Thank you very much. Welcome to the panel.
Hello.
It's pretty bright up here. Huh?
Good evening. Good afternoon.
I can't see the audience.
Everyone. So let me just introduce who we have here today. I think bio sheets have been circulated, but it's a real privilege to have David, who is flown down from Toronto and leads VP of Data at Sun Life. Stephen, who's coming from Tokyo, partly Singapore, from Daiichi. Paul, who's a software and technologist, co-founder of Parameta, and Ian from Zungan Tech. So real pleasure to have this distinguished panel over here. And what we'll do is over the next 50 minutes or so, we'll explore in terms of what's reality on artificial intelligence in insurance today, and hopefully leave some time for questions from members of the audience as well. So first, let me get started with you, David. I just wanted to, building on the theme of this particular panel, which is artificial intelligence and insurance, I wanted to get your perspective on what could the insurer of the future look like if you truly embrace the full potential of AI?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think the short answer is I don't know, but I don't think it's a linear extension of the insurer of the past. I think if we were to hypothesize, I think we get to a world where you get down to a client segment of one where you have hyper-personalized and tailored products and services that you can offer to all clients that are easy to manufacture and service. You have low-friction transactions, sales, and underwriting. You have servicing that's personal, predictive, and proactive. What I don't think is going to happen is that I don't think people are going away. I think people will still be in the loop, and I think it'll be an important part. But how and where agents and call center reps will show up, I think when, where, and how they interact with clients will change. And I think that that's going to necessitate that we also look at and value skills that they bring to the table differently. So whereas skills like efficiency may be prioritized today, in the future, skills like empathy may become much more important for people to have in the interactions that they do have. This particular point in time, it reminds me a little bit about an old joke, which is, two hikers are walking in the forest and they come upon a grizzly bear. And the first hiker gets down on his knees and starts to pray. And the second hiker starts lacing up his boots. And the first hiker says, "What are you doing? You can't outrun a bear." And the second hiker says, "I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you." And the reason I think it's apt at this point in time is looking at things like generative AI and artificial intelligence in general. There's a strong pull to look at just making the current processes faster, just being a bit more productive than the next insurer. And I think that that's an economic reality for all of us, and part of what we need to think about. But I think that that's playing not to lose rather than to win. So I think in parallel with that, the strategic thinking has to be, how do you use AI and technology? How do you leverage that to reimagine your business? How do you use that to reimagine products and services? How do you use it to reimagine the client journey at large? And I think that that'll be a real differentiator. I think, whoever can figure out how to leverage AI and change the mindset and the culture within their company is able to do that well is really going to win in this market. And I think there's also a real risk out there that it may not be a traditional insurer.
Fascinating. So clearly, David and Sun Life are hiked up to outrun at least other insurance companies, if not the bear. But Stephen, let me turn to you. Would love to get your perspective on how do you see an insurer of the future?
Sure. So I'd like to make the answer specific towards life and health. So when the insured is a human being. And to pick up, I think that it's really down to a transformative customer experience. So we were just chatting, I was chatting with Paul, and he was telling me of a let's call it a difficult experience he was having with one of his insurers. And I think that gets down to the depth of it. The application process is one big problem statement we have. Having to go through the underwriting process, go off and get fluid extraction. It can take weeks before you actually get a policy. And then we may even say we can't underwrite you. And then the other big problem statement is post-sales, when we try to service customers and the claims experience. How many of our customers can say they've always had fantastic claims experiences? So we've lived with these two major problem statements: the sales, the issuance, the underwriting, and the post-sales experience throughout the life, however long life insurance has existed. And we've tried to solve it in different ways. We've made some progress. And where I think AI will be transformative is in totally changing that. And it will enable instant issuance. I will instantly be able to tell you, because I've got some data proxies for your health, whether I can issue to you straight away or at what level I can cover you for. You won't need to go through all the painful fluid extraction. I'll know straight away if I can offer you that discount on the premium that I've just promised you, and you won't have to wait for it. And then at the other end, when you go to claim, I'll be able to pay you instantly, or not. You'd know the result, or I'll be able to pay you partially. And I think the insurer of the future that can deliver that level of customer service will be really offering a differentiated experience. And so I don't know when this will happen, but at last we have some powerful tools that can enable us to at least imagine these things. So I see it mainly in a transformative customer experience.
Wonderful. And I mean, it's a great vision. I'm sure all consumers all around will be delighted if we, as an industry, are able to transform that customer experience. Thank you, David and Stephen. Paul, let me turn to you. And you come with illustrious background in technology and software. So I had a different question for you, right? As you look at where technology is today, and you look at all insurers who you interact with, including some of the people sitting in the audience, what do you think people are underestimating the most? Like, what changes are happening in technology which we're really underestimating?
So I think, I thank you for the question, and thank you, David, for the earlier reference, because I think it helped me answer this question. I think for insurance companies, just as similar to financial services, I think we're really underestimating the technological progress that's happening and what is capable. So I'm just going to take about a minute on this real quick. If you can consider that you can hire a digital entity, a person that is capable of a Stanford level graduate now, that will fill a job description that you have and is capable of doing most of the digitalized tasks that you require of him, her, it. I think if you can get that at a scale and a cost and at a productive level where you're actually be able to master how to deploy, use, configure, optimize, I think you have to look at what does that mean for human capital versus digital capital, and how does that help your company? If you could hire for 1/100th of the cost of a certain employee, and I'm not talking about employee replacement, but for an augmentation standpoint, a Stanford level graduate, because as of yesterday, GPT-4 Turbo came out. We have technologies that's accelerating very, very quickly. How do we use it in ways that we can use it now so that you can actually take advantage of three things that will be going with the trend? Learning how to, deploying how to, learning from how did you deploy it to how can it be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ian, now let me turn to you to the flip side of my question to Paul, right? Which is, I mean, we've all been through hype cycles in technology, and every single technology goes through a hype cycle. What do you think is overhyped at the moment? Like, what are people overestimating in terms of what the technology can really do?
Yeah. So quite a interesting question, especially as a vendor trying to sell tech. But yeah, I think insurers are overestimating the challenges, but I think after a nudge and a reminder, but overestimating the challenges related to actually doing the consumer-facing, I guess, like experience transformation type of changes that can be impacted by AI. I think as mentioned earlier, there are kind of like questions around ethical AI and how these interactions work, right? There's a reason why we have agency and intermediary licenses and established regulation around this. So, and then this like looming fear of hallucinations associated with generative AI. How do you control for that, right? And then what will happen is, and we are working on projects where there are insurers aspiring to create an agent-like or a customer-facing like new business journeys, servicing journeys, and so on. And in these conversations, after a month of just kind of workshopping and designing user journeys, at some point, I step back and ask, like, what is the difference? If we're controlling that messaging and that generative AI content output this much due to regulation or concern and fear, how different is this from, 5 years ago, AI chatbots, right? Like Zhong'an in China, for many years, we've been depending and leaning on processing 95% of our service transactions with AI chatbots, right? And if the result of what we're doing is only 5% incremental customer experience change for that, is it even worth endeavoring on? I think this is kind of a big looming challenge, although of course we want to push this type of use case out the door. If you're not careful about it, you may not get the value you think you need, that transformative experience that you need. Now to counter that, if you kind of take a step back and then reboot it like the Stanford student kind of like mentality, when you do train an agent from scratch, out of school, you do give them testing, you give them certifications, you give that type of rigor in getting that license the same way. You can take the exact same approach with a generative AI agent, right? With that sort of mentality, how do I automate that? How do I get that in place? And then how do I get some level of equivalency? I think that's kind of conceptually the direction we need to kind of venture towards and try to see what that might look like and then pass that by a regulator, of course. But then there's also the aspect of, in that personalization, I think, so in using generative AI as a front end, there's a lot of belief that you can get towards hyper-personalization using this interface, which I also fully embrace and believe. And I think in this context, there's a question of data, right? So what kind of data are you going to be leveraging to kind of teach that into your generative AI bot or agent? And so I think there's some kind of deep thinking that needs to be double-clicked here on what that data source could be. It could be just from the dialogue in of itself, but I think a lot of insurers expect that they're accessing something internally. So I think without your own data exposed and accessible, depending on what you're looking at, whether it's our policy admin system and that policy data, or your claims history and your claims data, or your network data, or in terms of provider network or service network or ecosystem networks and that add on to your propositions today, if it's not accessing this type of data, is it really going to deliver that personalized journey that you wanted? I think these are kind of the challenges that will be the looming barriers to really maximize this opportunity.
Thank you, Ian. That's helpful, and it's good to get some realistic grounding before you get all excited about the potential of technology. But so far we covered essentially a couple of different exciting visions of the future. Paul, your sense of essentially fact that even yesterday GPT-4 Turbo was announced, and there were things we might be underestimating. Maybe let me shift to you again, Stephen, which is, okay, we spoke about the future, we spoke about the technology and where it might be going. I'd love for you to give us a realistic sense of where are we today, right? Like, what are real applications of AI or generative AI in insurance that you're starting to see get traction, right? Either in your own institution or in other institutions which you've seen. What's getting you excited in terms of where things are today?
Thanks, Vinay, for the question. So the other day I was in one of our contact centers, and I love going there to listen to customers calling in, hearing about what they're asking us. And there's one customer, she must have been an elderly lady, I think she had lost her lifelong partner, and she was talking through with one of our service agents, claims process. She had been married for, I think, 70 years. So this was obviously a very delicate part of her life. And it struck me at the end of the call that, and maybe this is overly romantic of me, but we as insurers have, I believe, a noble purpose to be there for our customers in their time of need. And I was thinking that how, certainly I would think in the near future, could an AI possibly replace the skill of that human touch? I think it goes back to what Paul was saying. So it's really a hybrid experience. And so tools that we have now that can support that type of really human experience is things such as recording conversations, data analytics of conversations, training back to the agents of the content of their conversation. Even in real time now, there are solutions that can give mood indications, tone it down a little bit, change the language a little bit. There are these kind of tools in the service centers. Now, in the agencies itself, it is also very much and becoming very much of a hybrid type of environment where you have agents starting the day in the morning, they get prompted by some kind of CRM tool, go out and visit these customers, these are your cases that you need to nurture, these are the hot leads, you happen to be close to these particular customers, and leads are matched by personality and on perhaps hobbies and what the agents like doing. And in this way, that gives the agents the best chance of a productive day. And so I think it's at this level. As we start to get into generative AI, I think many of the carriers are still in an exploratory stage. And we are deploying tools such as Microsoft's Copilot, and that's giving us some individual levels of efficiency. But we're still in a very, very much of an exploratory stage. We've started to launch things like within a very safe environment, for example, which allows more at the grassroots levels within the cloud a sandbox, so that everybody has admin work in their job and everybody wants to automate that or become somehow more efficient. And so as good as we can give these tools to the grassroots level so that it can innovate upwards, we're also trying to do that. But I think it's very much in an exploratory stage as we balance between these fantastic tools and things that we're reading about every day that they're capable of, versus our responsibility towards our customers, taking care of their data, taking care of how we use their data, and being responsible about the usage, particularly in AI tools, and particularly if we were to use those AI tools to make any kind of pricing and underwriting decisions. So we're at the beginning of what I think will be a very exciting journey towards that vision that I painted earlier on of reimagining our industry.
I have maybe a build on just some of the points that you highlighted. I think we're looking at the call center as actually a prime target for a lot of transformation. One of the pilots, proof of concepts we've recently done that we're moving towards production is actually building on real-time transcription of the call, real-time summarization, categorization of the call, and summary after. But it's also doing a real-time lookup against knowledge bases. So a client's calling in, asking a specific question. The system's going and looking in our knowledge base, presenting the most likely probable answer. Large language models are based on prediction and probability. Servicing that to the call center agent, who in real time then can respond to that request for a client. So we're moving that towards production. I think it's a high use case. Nobody likes calling into a contact center and waiting while an agent goes and looks up information. It's a very painful process, a lot of friction. So I think that that's an opportunity. And one other opportunity, we're looking at many, but another big opportunity is in our health space, we have doctors who routinely search recent publications on medicines and advancements in research literature, very time-consuming, dense literature. And so we're applying large language models to go and search on PubMed, looking at the most recent literature around diagnostics and treatments to see, should we be adjusting what we're covering in terms of treatments or in terms of prescription drugs and so forth. So again, using large language models, generative AI, to sort of take the drudgery out of some of the work and get to the parts that matter. It's either the client interaction or the adding new drugs to the coverage.
Super helpful, David and Stephen. And I love both the insurance call center example as well as the healthcare thing, which you said. It reminds me of, I think it was a recent experiment which was done by the NHS, where they attempted using AI for diagnostics, and they ran a pilot and control group. And I think what was very interesting was you would expect what you'd expect out of AI, which is the patients which received advice from AI. It was more accurate. But actually, they also preferred the AI for being more empathetic than the human. So something for us to keep in mind. But I wanted to come back to you, David, with one other question, which is, again, it's easy to get excited about the potential, but what are some of the real challenges which large enterprises face in realizing this full potential of this technology?
Yeah, no, I think the excitement's palpable. I go and talk to the different function heads, and they'll say, yeah, I'm super excited about generative AI. It's going to be transformative. It's going to be amazing. But let me tell you all the things that I'm worried about and all the challenges that I see coming up. And I think many of them are, and Paul was talking about this earlier, I think many of the challenges, the technical challenges, are actually quite solvable and are actually being solved quite quickly as we go along. So there are a lot of technical challenges that you need to worry about. Hallucinations is certainly one of them, but you see improvements and capabilities in the technical space coming along. I think the challenges are much more fundamental than that. And I'd say sort of in terms of the top three, number one would be people. I think people, both in terms of clients and employees. On the client side, I read a recent survey said only 13% of clients trust their current insurer, and less than 50% somewhat trust their current insurer, which means that more than half of your clients don't trust you.
So true.
And optimistically, 85% of your clients are going to have some questions about your motivations when it comes to capabilities. So when you talk about things like retinal scans or geriatric testing, or the Internet of Things, your clients are going to have serious questions about your motivations. This is really in their best interest. So I think that the first challenge around that is bridging that trust gap from clients to insurers. And I don't doubt that a lot of insurers have the altruistic intent of being, helping clients live healthier lives. We certainly do. But bridging that trust gap, I think, is going to be one of the first challenges. On the employee side, there's a lot of people who sort of pessimistically view generative AI as coming for their jobs. It's coming to take away their jobs. The reality is that generative AI isn't going to take away people's jobs. A person using generative AI is going to take away a person's job. And so I think bridging that with employees and helping them understand why it's going to help them move forward and how to prepare for the future and bringing them along for the ride is going to be super important as well. If you're asking people to disrupt their own jobs, you have to think about how are you moving them along that to a better future for them as well. Second big challenge, I think it's been talked about quite a bit throughout this conference, it's data, and is your data ready for AI and generative AI? A recent Gartner study said less than 4%, it was a survey of large companies, less than 4% of companies felt that their data was ready for AI and generative AI. So 4%, which means there's a massive amount of work to do there when it comes to data. And I think the last challenge is really around organizational structure and internal bureaucracy. I think if you think about your risk and your compliance and your sourcing and your HR and your security and your B leaders and your BG leaders, it's no wonder that large companies, insurers, kind of move at Olympic cycles. This technology is moving so quickly and changing, almost daily. There's something new coming out, and so I think that the challenge of building in organizational agility and really securing that top-down support will be super important as well.
Thank you.
I can ironically add a little bit more about the people aspect. So I think, and Copilot being the example, I heard that in the US, like the vast majority of developers are already using Copilot, even like self-voluntarily, if not actually provisioned by the organization. We just had like a leadership summit within Zhong'an in China. And and of course, like in the tech industry and in like Silicon Valley, there's a lot of pressure to kind of find like at least 20% more efficiency out of your developers and your tech staff. So Zhong'an, we're 50% tech staff, even in the insurance business, like in terms of just tech staff, right? And we were saying, okay, well, how have you guys started working and using Copilot as part of your operations? And then we got loads, and coming up to the summit, of course, we asked internally, like, can you run a survey? What are people doing? Are they already using Copilot? And funny enough, like in China, apparently there's this like vast culture of never spending your own money for work. And so no one bought their own kind of like subscription of Copilot. It was something like under 5% of utilization in our own developers. So I was like, wow, that's quite a surprise, like open dialogue with the other leaders. Not like that in the US at all. And then we're like, okay, well, what do you think in terms of like, if we did buy a subscription for all our tech staff, like what would we find? Like, what kind of efficiencies would we find? Then we got whole loads of excuses about like, well, actually, our tech staff, like when you really look at the FTE and the hours they spend, like only 50% of that is in the coding. Like the other 50% is actually in the design, in the architecture, and doing research and these types of things. It's like, all right, but does that mean you're not going to use Copilot? Like, what's going to happen here? So back to the point about like bringing top-down operations and making sure we actually embrace it from a culture perspective, which ironically at a tech company, we're struggling to embrace tech. Here, we actually have to put it in our OKR that next year, at the end of next year, 5% of all our code base needed to be generated from Copilot. Meaning, like even encompassing today's code, right? Like total code, we need at least 5% of that next year to be generated by generative AI. So that's our target next year. So this has been quite a bit of a force-for push, and we all had hoped we didn't have to make it a force-for push. But it turns out that it had to come top-down to kind of find this efficiency gain.
I could just pick up on, I think this is a really interesting topic. How do you actually incentivize people to use these new tools? And we've set up an internal digital community just from all across different departments. And we started, as I said, we've created a safe environment for people to experiment. But to encourage people to actually think differently has been challenging. Although we started to get, if you can, for example, we have customer complaints processing. Customer complaints are completely random. They're in completely random text, and it takes a team of people to analyze them. This is exactly the sort of things that, for example, Copilot or any generative AI, if you point it at it, it can start to analyze it and group it up. And so somebody came up with this idea, hey, let's point it at this. And suddenly they can save, they'd spend a week, a month on that, and then they can spend that week doing something else more productive. Coming up with deeper insights, for example, to the customer complaints, and in turn delivering a better customer service. So I think it will have a snowball effect once people start to see, oh, hey, this stuff isn't so difficult to use. My life can get easier. I can go and do more interesting, motivating things rather than the drudgery. I think adoption levels would increase.
Thank you.
It's funny because I think one of the surveys we did internally, we're rolling out the code automation tooling to all of our developers, and we did a baseline. We showed that they were 41% more productive, both junior and senior developers, and we got the same argument. Well, they don't code all the time; they do other things. I said, okay, what's the break-even point? The break-even point was if they were even just less than 1% more productive, there was an ROI on the tooling. So the complaint wasn't there. They said, okay, well, will developers enjoy? Do they like it? Do they feel like it's taking their job? They're 60% more satisfied using the tooling than not having the tooling. So I think it is, that snowball is starting to roll, and I think it's going to be brought a little bit from the bottom, but I think top down needs to be supported as well.
So very helpful set of perspectives, David, Stephen, and Ian. I wanted to switch to the other side a little bit and come to you, Paul. And before we came on stage, we were just chatting. So we spent a lot of time discussing how can insurance companies apply AI. I mean, and Paul, you may not be the natural average insurance customer, but I think it's quite interesting on how can customers use AI in dealing with insurance companies. And you had a great example of your complaint, but did you want to bring that to life in terms of what was that experience and how did you go about using AI to deal with the insurance company?
Yes, so I wanted to quickly, real fast, you can always make people's lives easier when they engage with new technology by making it similar to what they're already doing. So we have use cases where we take AI, we construct the AI to make menu options so people click and don't have to prompt, because people hate prompting. So I think there's many ways to be innovative and at the same time to give people a transition bridge to use AI, and this is called unbundling, bundling, whatever you want, but there's different ways to use AI. Just think of AI as a person, then you can do a lot. You can reimagine a lot, because a person may give you a piece of paper, a person may give you a menu that you can order from, like you order food, you order documents, you order reports done, whatever it is. So there's many ways. Now back to the consumer side, I would be very worried if I was an insurance company about upcoming technologies, especially in the aggregation platform, which would consume interests like my own, where I had an insurance incident, I had to work with my insurance company. It was very painful. So I built a bot basically to complain. Because I was tired of complaining and I wanted 24/7 complaining. So I think it's very, very important that you realize that's going to happen, and that's going to happen at scale. Complaining, buying, managing, and in the future, if we get to where this one-to-one, I have an AI pair, my duo, that my duo is going to make a lot of decisions. It's not going to make the final decisions, but it's going to parse out for me. There's 10 different insurance companies. Which one has a better policy? Why? What did other customers say? What did other AI agents say about their experience? Tell me what's happening and tell me what to do. This is going to happen. You cannot stop that. So once that gets to that point where there's aggregation, what kind of power do you have? You just become, basically a commoditized layer. And then later, you have to look at what technology companies can do. They can replicate your business model. It's already happened in China. So you have technology coming into insurance company, insurance business. So I think it's very, very dangerous not to really understand the changes that are going to happen, which we've already experienced in the mobile era, the PC era, with the internet. So it's going to happen. And I just think that it's just like, it'd be kind of ignorant to not see that a lot of change is coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Paul. And to everyone in the audience, if you see a massive explosion in complaints, just check if you have somebody called Paul in your customer base. I also thought that was a very unique and different example of how do you use AI. And Ian, I wanted to build off that and also ask this question to Stephen and David as well. As you've looked at AI, what's some of the most interesting and counterintuitive examples, either use cases or examples which you've seen AI being applied to? The complaint bot was one example, but I'd be curious to see if you had other examples for the audience.
Counterintuitive. I think counterintuitive, I think, is a bit rough, but because we try to think about how do you apply like some sort of co-pilot mechanism across all operational users across the company, like an individual company. And I think the surprises that come up are more around knowledge management, and then how you may want to test certain hypotheses inside your own data sets that you would not know exist. So, for example, we opened up in our BI tool to access like claims data. It may be anything from like claims, policy, any transaction data that might happen in your core system. And so if you just open it up such that you can query from like a generative AI type of experience, like a private domain LLM, what might come out, right? And I'm sure there's like all sorts of awkward things that will come up that we ended up using in terms of like, let's say, optimizing an underwriting questionnaire. I'm designing a new health product. What are some useless questions that never helped me in like risk management, right? And I think they're like kind of these like odd things that would have taken like a couple of users, different functional users, to kind of sit around a table and discuss it a little bit. But in this case, I could just query these like random questions into my BI tool and just double check. And then you could develop a hype. Not to say that, I think we also fear hallucinations, so we don't just jump and believe that's a conclusion, but at least it opens like topics of dialogue. Then we sit around a table and really confirm, like, are we really observing this based on what we're querying in the BI tool? So I think that might be something that is a little bit of a out-of-box type of use case.
Thank you. Paul, you wanted to add?
I'm just going to say the OpenAI just released their news on the Dev Day about their new bot market, the marketplace. So instead of app market, it's going to be a bot market, GPT market. So I could imagine very, very soon that they would have like biased, help you buy insurance bot that is biased towards a certain type of customer. Not customer, but supplier. So I could imagine that, we're entering an area where you kind of want to be making, you want to build a brand, not just, online and in the physical world, but also in the bot world as well. Because you're going to have to, like, if there's a bot that's biased towards a certain supplier, they're going to, it's already, and it gets traction, you're in big trouble.
Actually, this is an excellent alternative use case. Actually, we were discussing this internally, that you can build, so we were debating internally ethical AI, and how do you kind of manage to that? Because what we have models internally when we use private domain LLMs to run audits, right? That's part of our procedural process when we create models. And then after we deploy them in production, we constantly have to audit to get rid of bias. But then we thought, why don't we build agents that are biased a certain way, and they just argue with it, and then run tests against that particular model. So like one may be challenging it in terms of trying to trick it into optimizing a certain like investment return, while another one may try to get the lowest premium in terms of like health questionnaires. And then you have different approaches to challenge the model, but using agents, because everyone didn't want to like generate use cases, like test cases themselves to maintain. So can we get an AI agent to do that for us instead? And just like, so you have separate prompting to build these agents.
That reminds me of this Dilbert comic, where you have like a massive Gen AI generated series of emails which are being sent out, and another generative AI which is summarizing all those emails to respond to them.
Yeah.
So we may be in a very different world. But Stephen, David, any other interesting, fascinating use cases you wanted to add, something which caught you by surprise?
So I spent the afternoon in a studio in London a few weeks ago recording my movements and my voice. It took about 3 hours. So I now have an avatar of me and my voice, and I was kind of playing around with it more as a tool before I actually thought how we were going to use it. And some of the use cases we're coming up with is how can we scale? I can't be everywhere all of the time. And so I'm providing some kind of insights to our executives on how the digital roadmap for insurance, for example. So instead of me doing that, I just put all of the PowerPoints together, and then my avatar does that, so I can be doing something else at the same time. Also, it has 20, 30 different languages. So we're in 10 markets, not all of them are English speaking. And so it gets me to speak in other languages. I still think there may be some broader training opportunities there, or maybe even customer engagement to scale our agents. But that was a surprising use case, which was far easier to use than I expected.
We're very lucky. Thank you, Stephen. We have the real version of you where your avatar is probably somewhere else. But David, anything you would add?
Yeah, I don't know about surprising use case. I think one of the real surprising effects for me was as we've done more and more experiments and brought in people, it's hard to sort of see the future. Like, you know, Steve Jobs used to say, like, nobody was asking for the iPhone or even knew what the iPhone was before the iPhone was there. So the invention created the need. And I think that that's true with generative AI as well. And we're starting to see, you know, getting in with a simple use case is spawning more and more use cases. Like, hey, what about this next one? And a good example was we were doing a knowledge base, sort of a chatbot on a deep legacy knowledge base. And one of the questions that got spawned after we were going through the, you know, created the chatbot and could ask it questions was, you know, can we identify where we have legacy documents? Like often, like many large insurance companies, we have documents which are out of date or conflict with each other or aren't in sync. So the question was, well, if it can read all of these, can it identify where there's an overlap or where we need to update our policies or where our policies conflict with each other? And so you sort of see this building of ideation and innovation based off of the experiments and driving that out. So I think that was kind of interesting and exciting to see, is that, you know, we don't know what the future is, but you can get there iteratively by trying it out.
Very cool. No, thank you so much to all of you for adding. I mean, you're probably familiar with it, but the early example which stood out for me was this notion of that, you know, if you buy skinny jeans, what's the next product which you're likely to buy? And what stood out there was from China, right? That, you know, the most likely product is actually an insurance product. You could buy screen insurance or phone insurance. So fascinating. I know John is up here, and I wanted to leave some time for the audience questions.
We've used AI to create some questions. So
we'll use AI to answer them.
Can I succeed in traditional industry like life insurance, which is still even struggling with applying basic emotional intelligence in its largely agency-driven customer experience models?
Stephen, did you want to start off?
Sure. So, can AI exceed? I think AI can, certainly AI can exceed. Whether the question means can the life insurance industry successfully use AI, that remains to be seen, although I am positive that it can. I think AI can succeed because, as we just heard, AI will become to help us co-pilot our lives, and will be able to will know us very well and what our needs are, and will be able to provide nudge suggestions as to what's the best way to give us the reassurance of, say, a life policy, and might even suggest which carrier to go to. So I think that it can absolutely succeed. Now, there are certainly a few things to consider along the way there, not least of all responsibility towards data, fairness in things such as risk underwriting, particularly where it is applied to a person's health and their mortality. However, I think it can absolutely ultimately succeed in the industry.
I would add there a little bit. I think people would be surprised that when you create an agent, or just even in like therapy for like like mental disorders.
Say AI agent.
AI agent. Yeah. But if you just take a step back though, like I think we're seeing a lot more of like telemedicine and like teletherapists, right? And I think the observation there is that it doesn't have to be in person to be very personal and like the kind of highest end of being having high EQ and that level of engagement. I think people would be surprised that when you engage like an AI agent, you're probably less sensitive about disclosing certain types of information that you would have felt sensitive to disclose to a human. So like personal information about like your divorce and I have a child that I want to leave behind, some sort of protection or some context around that. Maybe those topics doesn't need to be like teased out and extracted from like a human engagement that takes time to develop. It might be, there are certain scenarios, I'm sure, that actually there are advantages of being an AI agent versus a human agent and be able to actually directly address personal needs that may be sensitive if I had to disclose it to another human being. So I think in that aspect, there's actually probably some unique advantages in that type of engagement and experience. I think a lot of young people don't like disclosing information to agents in general. So I think this kind of new type of interface will open doors to a new segment.
Can I
Yeah,
just
go ahead,
10
Paul.
seconds? So absolutely, I'm just going to say it for the record, I think absolutely AI will participate in life insurance sales, and absolutely it will come to dominate the interface between the customer and the agent. The agent is a captive network where insurance companies find a person that has a captive network, friends, social network, and then the cost of acquisition in that network is much cheaper than they can buy in public or paid markets. So they acquire an agent goes to sell the stuff, but in the future, if an AI partner of that person can sell into their social network, it's even much easier. You know, it doesn't look like them trying to like beg for something. So there's a lot of benefits. So it's coming, it's gonna come.
Thanks, Paul. Can you, the next question, can you speak to how the industry is currently handling ethical and regulatory challenges, and if you think they are approaching it in the correct way?
You want to shut us up, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think the industry and regulators are quite fragmented on this and going in many different directions. It depends on the jurisdiction, but I would say, you know, for Sun Life, the ethical standards that we hold ourselves to and the promise we've made to our clients, we take very seriously. And so we've put into place the controls and the guardrails and the rules right from day one. So we brought in our compliance and our risk partners and our privacy partners to say, draw the line around what you're comfortable with us experimenting with and where we're going to use generative AI. And if we think or see a use case that's going to exceed those boundaries, we'll come back and we'll check with you. I actually believe that the standards we hold ourselves to are higher than the regulations that are out there right now. And I think the regulations are going to evolve, and so we're going to have to be nimble and adjust as they become more public.
Stephen, anything?
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of a journey, and many regulators and us carriers as well are working through how to react towards this. Yeah, we're putting guardrails in place, and those are still evolving as we're learning the different areas of our business, sometimes surprising areas of this business that this can impact. So, for example, just going back to the simple case of my avatar, what if, who has right over using that? What if we had the avatar of our CEO and his voice? Now that's just these are not implications of this we've never had to think about. So it is evolving. We are, by our nature, a conservative industry, yet we want to balance that conservatism with the need for change. And as Paul was saying, that change is going to come, and it may well not come from within our industry.
Cool. And maybe one more question? No, we're not doing one more question.
So then
I think
I had one last question to wrap us up in terms of the panel, and maybe it's the same question. I'll start with you, Ian, which is if you were to articulate one word of hope for the industry, right? And if you were to say that, you know, what would you wish would be true today, what would that be in terms of the context of AI and insurance?
One word?
Or one sentence.
I think certainly...
Poetic license.
I think the opportunities are certainly limitless across the value chain. I definitely think that's absolutely true.
What would you, Paul? What would you hope?
I would be very worried about also the entire business model, because, you know, what are you going to invest in the future? What are the capital returns are going to come from? I mean, if people really think about that, especially executives and the board, that's really going to be a difficult business model going forward.
You're leaving us with a concern. I want more hope for the audience.
The whole part is don't wait to do something. I mean, you know, with anything in life, it's like AI is a new language. You must learn it. It's like many people learn English so they can communicate globally. AI is a language you have to learn. It's just simple. But that's the hope that you will learn and you can find a place in the future, because I think the future is going to be far more dramatic than ever, because we've actually created intelligence. You know, somewhat. It's not, well, I can't say it's exactly intelligence, might be far superior to intelligence. We've created it. It's only going to get better, smarter, faster, and scarier. Sorry. Okay, is that hope? No, sorry.
Hey, you did really well till faster, smarter, better. We'll delete this career part.
Sorry.
Okay, Stephen.
So I think I'm exceptionally optimistic. This is a chance for the industry to really reimagine itself. Most insurance is a grudge purchase. We don't want to think about the prospect of us getting sick or worse, us dying. And I think this kind of technology enables our products to be more naturally embedded into our customers' lives so they don't have to think about it. They're given the reassurance that an insurance product provides them with without that drudgery of that underwriting process, without the drudgery of the claims process as it is now. And I think it will revolutionize our industry for the good.
David?
Yeah, no, I was going to say essentially the same thing. Like, I think this is a real opportunity to change the way insurance is viewed and bought and sold. And I think that it really can help insurance companies live to their purposes of helping clients live healthier lives.
Wonderful. My hope for everyone in the audience and all of you is that, there is, it's a lot more intelligent as a product. There is less toil for all the employees as well as the customers. And there's more joy in people's lives as we embrace this technology. But thank you so much for being such a wonderful panel. It was a pleasure having this conversation with all of you.
Let's thank the panel.